couple of weeks ago, I had the great privilege of a meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury in his office at Lambeth Palace. It was very humbling to be invited to meet him, and I must say that he was a very gracious host, receiving myself and the Principal Secretary, Paul Feely. Very generous in terms of the amount of time he gave to us, 2 hours in fact. He was very interested in my reflections on the state of the Church in Canada coming out of General Synod in June in Winnipeg. One of the things that really impressed me about him was his interest in every aspect of the General Synod and how the theme, Draw the Circle Wide, played itself out throughout the course of the Synod. So we talked obviously about issues of sexuality and how those took their course in the Synod. He had some interesting comments to make about the Canadian Church and how we are wrestling our way through issues of human sexuality. He described our work as coherent in its nature. He described the outcome of our resolutions as cautious and judicious. And he was very taken with the pastoral statement that the bishops had worked hard to create at their April meeting, and in fact suggested that that statement might indeed be a model that he hoped others in the communion might take up. I found that to be very encouraging, and it was a great delight to be able to bring that kind of a message back to the fall meeting of the Host of Bishops. The Archbishop was also interested in our work, continuing work around residential schools and the next phase as we move from settlement into truth and reconciliation. He was very interested in the development around the installation of a national Indigenous Anglican bishop, very interested in where we are going in terms of next steps as a church in full communion with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, and very intrigued by the impact of that very deep relationship upon other ecumenical conversations in which we're engaged, particularly with Roman Catholics. He was interested in resolutions that we considered at the Synod around the state of the world, companion diocese programs, a renewed call to nurture those, and the Millennium Development Goals. Clearly, the Archbishop of Canterbury takes very seriously his vocation by virtue of the office he holds to be an instrument of communion. And I took opportunity when I was with him to thank him for his time that he spent with the Host of Bishops in the spring, sharing with him that for many of us to have him come among us as an apostle, as a teacher, as a man of prayer, said so much to us about him being a living sign of the instrument of communion that he's called to be. The Archbishop of Canterbury and I also had a chance to share some reflections around the upcoming Lambeth Conference and his great desire to shape that conference around the 5 marks of mission for the Anglican Communion, and those include proclaiming the gospel, nurturing believers, compassionate service to those who are suffering, issues of peace and justice, and the integrity of creation, the stewardship of the earth. His great desire is to help the bishops to take some time in Lambeth to study and pray together with respect to how they can be effective leaders in that mission. His hope is that the Lambeth Conference will be conversation heavy and resolution light, and that indeed will be a challenge for him and for the planning team for that hope to be fully realized. I felt very privileged to be able to sit with him for 2 hours and walked away from that encounter grateful for his leadership as the current Archbishop of Canterbury and mindful of my own personal need and of yours to uphold him in our prayers on a daily basis. Thank you.